once you live the Eightfold Path, once you understand what it means, how it works, how to apply it, and this is what we've been doing here on this retreat, and I'll try to explain a bit more around that. And there's two stages to it. There's Magga and then there's Phala. There's the path and then there's the fruit. The path is vague. It's a vague thing, It's not very clear cut. There's no specific attainment that, to boom, like fireworks, welcome to, the stream or something like that. So there was this lady in Sri Lanka. Her family was like, "Yeah, you should go, Mom. You should go back to the retreat and have a retreat." And then she's like, "Yeah, okay, maybe I'll go." And then after she does the retreat, and they start giving out these certificates. And they give her the certificate and they say like, "Congratulations, you're a stream enterer." And she really gets mad. She's like, "What? Last time you gave me anagami." And I just think that's really funny. Here and there, sometimes we hear about these stories that these so-called kind of levels of awakening in Buddhism are kind of conflagrated and given a lot of importance, like outwardly, and there's a kind of a like ceremonies and certificate giving and all of these things, like people telling other people what they are, and it's kind of it's just funny to me because in the tradition I ordained in the forest tradition in Sri Lanka, even within monastics, we're not really outspoken about these things. And so it's really interesting to hear these stories and how it's kind of getting out of control sometimes. And what I'm familiar with is I would maybe go to the forest and see an elder monk, and we have a talk on the Dhamma, like an exchange, and we pay our respects, and it's really kind of it's a beautiful exchange. There's a lot of mutual respect and love, and we're very careful about our vocabulary because we don't want to be boastful about things, about things like that. It's in our Viriya, it's on our 227 rules. There's actually 2 rules about this. One that is actually one of the 4 most important rules that if we break, we're not a monk anymore and we cannot ordain ever again in this lifetime. So that's pretty serious. So these are like the 4 parajikas that we have to know. Like this is like, if you want to know at least 4 rules, like these 4 ones, you have to know. Because if you break them, you don't even need to tell anybody, you don't, like the Sangha, it doesn't matter, you're not a monk anymore on the spot. You're just somebody wearing robes. And that's it. And in that case, it would be like consciously, it's pretty bad, but it's consciously lying about an attainment that we don't have. Because the thing about these things is that it brings a lot of popularity, and it brings a lot of, it attracts a lot of, thank you. That's fortunately, I didn't say anything. This is hot. Burning contact. It attracts a lot of attention, and the rule was laid down because some monks were hungry, and they just basically lied about their attainments to some lay people so that they could get food. And that's just an example about food, but that's it's playing with people's faith basically, because you're basically using the Dhamma, the actual real power of the Dhamma, the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, for your own kind of ends. And that's just it's just not somewhere we want to go. And so of course you have to be consciously lying, and so that would be pretty bad. Actually, the Buddha himself said this is the highest kind of theft in the sasana, in the dispensation, is to claim something that we're not. Because when we do that, we're of course, a lot of fame is going to come for us. But then we're destroying the faith in the real Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, who are actually practicing properly. And the people who learn afterwards that it wasn't true, it's not good, because it's actually affecting the whole thing, the whole faith system. And as monks, our whole lives are dependent on lay support. And so it's a very in French we have this expression, is pensez-y bien, is like think about it well. Think about it for a bit, because everything that we do, we're dependent. So there's that mutual exchange that happens, and playing with the faith, it's like, that's why I love going on alms round, for example, because first I don't really choose what I'm getting, but also it's very humbling to see. Sometimes I would go for alms in very poor areas, rural side areas in Sri Lanka, in India, where in Sri Lanka it happened quite a few times. I'm pretty sure somebody gave me their only meal of the day, and that hits you hard. You can't just waste your time. So it keeps that connection alive, and what we do in so many ways is relating to that and nourishing that connection. And so the other rule is that basically monks cannot even say anything about their own attainments, and that includes jhana, like our own meditation practice. So there's things that we can mention, but we cannot talk about a specific thing that we're experiencing in terms of jhana, or even at that level. So that's how, within monks we can. That's an open kind of. But even then, we all know that. People will talk about it one-on-one kind of thing, on a private conversation, but it's never going to be a public thing, So there's this saying in the Suttas. It's somebody asking Sariputta, the Venerable Sariputta, the stream of Dhamma, the stream of Dhamma. But what is the stream of the Dhamma? And Sariputta answers, it is this 8-spoked path of the Aryas. of the noble ones. And so, because of this understanding, we can understand that entering the stream, for example, which is considered the first level of kind of becoming part of the Sangha, part of the community of practitioners, and of awakening, if we want to call it that, of Arya Puggalas. It is about understanding the Dhamma. It is not about a certificate. It's not about somebody that's going to tell you what you are. Actually, the only person that did that ever was the Buddha. Because he was the only one to be able to actually do that. Anybody else after that, even the head disciples of the Buddha would not ever venture there. They would always kind of like, it was always asked to the Buddha. And the closest thing we can find is like somebody on their deathbed saying like, Bhante, I do not see like any of the 5 fetters in my mind. And they would say, good friend. It is good for you. That's about it. So, because I see these tendencies, and social medias and technology has brought a lot of wonderful opportunities for us, and in terms of Dhamma too. When you think about Sutta Central and all these beautiful opportunities. Not too long ago, the suttas were reserved to the monastics. That's now millions of people have access to it. So that's beautiful. It comes with, it's a double-edged sword, I would say. It comes with also little slips in understandings. And I like to correct that a little bit, and not opposing anything, but just offering, what's in the suttas and what are we really talking about here. And I'm not going to go into great details about the stages of awakening, but just talking about the Eightfold Path as the stream. And once you live the Eightfold Path, once you understand what it means, how it works, how to apply it, and this is what we've been doing here on this retreat, and I'll try to explain a bit more around that. Well, that's what it is, and there's 2 stages to it. There's Magga and then there's Phala. There's the path and then there's the fruit. Then the path is vague. It's a vague thing, It's not very clear cut. There's no specific attainment that that boom, like fireworks. Welcome to, the stream or something like that. It's not like that. It works through certain conditions, and one of them is actually doubt is gone. Why is doubt gone? One of the fetters? Because one understands what the Eightfold Path is. That's just what it is. And without understanding what the Eightfold Path is, and by the way, I translate the Eightfold and Noble Path as the Eight-spoked path. You're going to hear me say that. We need to know what it is, how it works. And so hopefully tonight we can clarify that a little bit. And I want to invite Venerable to please join me in the conversation at any point. You want to add anything? And so I thought I would pick up where I left it yesterday evening. I was talking about, in the deep end of dependent origination, we were talking about, I was using this Canoe Expedition that I did, which was actually what inspired this analogy in my head over time. That memory of that canoe expedition up, it was the George River in northern Quebec, and to get there is quite a journey, and it took us like 34 days to paddle the whole thing, and we had to go upriver, just for those who weren't there yesterday, and we had to go upriver for quite a few days, maybe a couple of weeks. And then at some point, as I was explaining how the mind works, and there comes a point where we cross what is called a drainage divide. And so from one side of a mountain range or a ridge, all of the water will flow south, for example, towards, let's say, the St. Lawrence, because that's Quebec. And then on the other side of that ridge, all the water flows north. And the George River flowed north into the Arctic Ocean. So that was our journey. So this whole path is like, for a long time, we're kind of like paddling upstream, and we're kind of hauling our canoe and all of our stuff. And it's tedious, it's hard work. And once we come, the higher we go upstream, and it's like, okay, understanding how the landscape is and working with it and going step by step. And one thing I remember understanding was like, don't try to think too far ahead. Like, don't look at the map and be like, yeah, we really have to like go up this thing, and it's gonna take us like 5 days, and you know it's gonna be, oh, there's this waterfall, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then just like be here, rock after rock kind of thing, like rapid after rapid. Don't try to think about what's like on top of that thing, and just deal with what's at hand here. There will be times where the meditation is good, and there will be times where the meditation is a bit more rocky, a bit more dry. You have to haul up your canoe a little bit more. But you're still moving forward, and it's the same process. And if you want to try to change it, if you want to change your meditation, and that was not one person today, that was quite a few. On retreat, it's really funny because things happen like a lot in groups. It's really interesting to like group will go through different, like same steps together kind of thing without even knowing. And so so it's really and like it's been many retreats, and we noticed that like it's not everybody all the time, but it's very common. And so today that was one of the things that came up. And not to make a big deal out of it. That's another thing that Bhante would say, like, don't make a big deal out of things. Don't make a big deal out of if your meditation's a little bit harder or like slower. Actually, it's a good meditation still, because you're still moving ahead, and sometimes you having a lot of distractions is actually cleansing your mind a lot. And then sometimes the next meditation is going to be really good because of that. So you can't just judge on these things. And so just keep doing the practice, and that's good. And then at some point there was not enough water, and we have to kind of portage, and there's this kind of little bit of a higher ground, and at some point we go on the other side of the drainage divide to the one that flows north, for example. That's the image that came for me when I thought of our practice and encountering the stream of Dhamma. And the stream of Dhamma, once we get there, once we really get settled in it and we start to really see it and see how it flows, it tends towards release. It tends towards liberation. Slowly, of course, but it flows the other way. And that also helps us. And so in whichever way that we get there to that point, it can take a long time. It's about developing wholesome qualities and abandoning unwholesome ones. So there's not a specific meditation attainment that's going to happen, but at some point someone will get really familiar with this beautiful territory of the Dhamma and the landscape and how to get there and how to find the stream, and that will become their main kind of playground, and the stream flows the other way towards release. There's many ways in which this can be understood, but for now we'll be there. And tonight we'll be using a sutta that's in the Pūjā book. It's the Vibhanga Sutta. I had my Pūjā book with the bookmark in it. Page 112. And the Vibhanga means an explanation. And this is, on my journey, I really was trying to understand what the Eightfold Path was, like really, because I was like everybody's talking about the Eightfold Path, but like, what is it? Because I heard, one person on retreat said, well, I know it's a lot of right things, and we need to do the right, you need to do the right things, like there's a lot of right things to do, and we need to do the right things. And so I thought that was kind of cute, but yeah, so I knew what they were, like the eight spokes or the eight folds, but I didn't know like what they meant. And then I found the sutta, and that was actually the first sutta that I translated. It was one of the suttas that actually got me to start translating, because I wanted to really understand what the Buddha was saying in the Pali. So tonight we'll explore this, and it's not a very long sutta. But it's a very clear and to the point description of what the path is. And so the Buddha goes, monks and nuns, like this is you again. Like for those who weren't there yesterday, we're in a bit of a theater mode here. I will teach you the Eightfold Path, the eight-spoked path of the awakened ones, and I will break it down for you. Listen carefully and apply your mind to what I will say. Yes, Bhante, the monks replied. What is this eight-spoked path of the awakened ones? It is here as follows: wise understanding, wise attitude, wise speech, wise behavior, wise living, wise practice, wise awareness or presence of mind, and wise meditation. And here, this is where one of the places I've left Samādhi for meditation, as meditation instead of mental collectedness. Another place where we find this interchangeability between Samādhi and meditation is the threefold training of Sila, Samādhi, Panya, and Dana, Sila, Bhavana. So these are threefold trainings that are really often used to explain what this teaching is. And bhavana and samadhi are really interchangeable. So in that context anyways. So it's about cultivation and developing the mind, basically. And as you know, if you still have a pen around, I'll give the classical terms. The first one would be right view. Yes, very good. Ditti. Wise attitude would be a right intention. Yes, and I also use intention sometimes. It's not that it's a bad word at all. Wise speech, right speech. Yeah, that's pretty easy. Wise behavior, right action. Yes. Wise practice, wise living. Sorry. Right livelihood. Wise practice, right effort. Yes. Wise awareness, right mindfulness. Yes. And wise meditation, right concentration. Yes. Very good. Okay, and what is this wise understanding, monks and nuns? That is knowing what is tension, knowing the cause of tension, knowing the release from tension, knowing the way to release the tension or the path. Tension can be translated, of course, this is dukkha. I really like to translate it like that in a meditative context because it's really applicable. But just as a quiz or just as an interesting question, what do you think the Buddha refers to when he's talking about dukkha? Is it like everything's dukkha, like the floor is dukkha, like the speaker is dukkha, or like the plastic chair is dukkha? What is he actually talking about? What? Affliction? Yes. I guess maybe in what context he means that.
Suffering?
So yes, suffering. That's one of the words. But in was he talking about material things? What is he talking about?
It's our experience.
Yes, our experience.
So the experience as if there's always something not quite right. So
Mm-hmm.
it's like, I think the analogy of the wheel in the cart,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a little broken, so it just doesn't roll along, doesn't feel right. It's that kind of, in life, it's just never feeling right.
Yeah. That's one of the elements. I guess it's part of all of the what he's talking about. It's kind of like a way of seeing it, I guess, an imagery, which is quite lovely. But wouldn't he be speaking more about mental states? Mind, body, yeah. The 5 aggregates sometimes, maybe. What did you say?
The delusion of self?
Yeah. The 5, I like to call them the fabrics of the ego, the aggregates of clinging. All the things that we cling to as, this is me, this is myself. But also, because I think this is really important to understand, sometimes we have this idea, it's like the Buddha is saying, everything is dukkha, It's okay. But he's mostly talking about mental states, because he's saying, what's the second noble truth? The cause. What is the cause? So if we were to investigate a little bit. Tanha, craving. So if we remove the cause, then technically there's no more of that. This is kind of like what you go through in a medical kind of inquiry. Diagnosis, yes. To diagnose a patient, basically, and treat them. And that's the Buddha's kind of, the format that he was using at his time too. That's what they were using. And because he also sometimes, he's referred to, and he refers to himself as the great surgeon, who's removing the dart of craving in the heart. So, and that's exactly what that means. And so this is slowly what we're doing here with the 6 hours every day. This is what it is. We're not going too far into really repeating over and over, this is the 4 Noble Truths and all that. But when you see the tension that comes with the distractions have a little bit of craving in it. It's not this big furry monster, like I said yesterday, with big teeth, drooling, It's just that there's a little bit of dissatisfaction, maybe, like you were saying, there's a little bit of maybe a bump on the wheel, there's discontent, there's a little bit of that Venerable was using, the magnetic kind of pull, which I thought was really good. And that's kind of pulling us outside for some reason. And that comes with tension. Craving manifests as tension. in the body and in the mind also. And once we start, and this is what we've been doing since day one here, is actually we're practicing the Four Noble Truths. Every time you siksar, it's the Four Noble Truths. You're seeing through the lens, the template, the blueprint of the Four Noble Truths. So wise understanding is about, okay, this is the template. This is how we need to start understanding mental states, especially unwholesome ones, as, creating that tension. And then what's the path out of it? So we don't stop there. We actually, there's a further path out of this. Yes.
Sorry.
Yes.
Earlier you were saying that dukkha is really about our mental states.
Yes.
What about when the Buddha explains what dukkha is, which he gives examples of old age, sickness and death?
Yes, yes. Of course, there's that element as well. Let's say there's different levels to it, and depending how far in you want to go, I would say for our purpose here, we kind of keep it on the mental state side. My main goal, my primary goal is to make that useful for everybody, and to it's true that at a certain level, it's one of the first discourses he taught, basically, the turning of the wheel, and it's pretty shocking. It's like, birth is suffering, like death is suffering, old age is suffering, sickness is suffering. It's like, But the thing is, and again, in my perspective of keeping this teaching uplifting, he was talking to the five ascetics at that point, right? So the five ascetics, when the Buddha broke through to awakening, he searched his mind and he searched the world to see who would understand what he just discovered, because it was not easy to understand. And first he thought of his first two teachers, and then he's like, some deva just told him they're passed, they just passed, they just actually passed last week. And so, and then his mind flowed towards the five ascetics, the Jain ascetics actually, who were practicing with him. And from what I understand, these five ascetics were quite, advanced on the path. Like they had gone forth and they were just practicing tapas, like severe penance, and they were all in. Like the Buddha started eating one meal a day again, and they're he's slacking off, he's just reverted back to a life of luxury. So they're they left him. So we can go there, we can go to that place, but I think that's a very advanced teaching. I think that's a very kind of advanced, of course we can see it like that. But I think because also the main template that the Buddha would use is basically just the Four Noble Truths. Like in the simile of the elephant's footprint, Sariputta says, of all the teachings, they're like the Four Noble Truths are like the elephant footprint, because they're all of the footprints of all the animals fit inside the elephant's footprint. Of all the teachings, they all fit inside the Four Noble Truths, because that's the big template for what we do. And so that works on many levels. But mainly, I would say, because he's talking about the cause of suffering being tanha, being discontent, dissatisfaction, I would say that it is actually mostly about our mental state. And it's true that birth is actually, that's why I translate that sutta as birth is troublesome, aging, sickness, and death is troublesome. Because that's also kind of traumatic when people hear birth is suffering. And, well, I mean, it's kind of half true, half... Like my mom, I said that to her in my innocence at the beginning of the path. I was like, like birth, like nobody's happy when they're born, like, and she's like, well, actually, you were smiling. So I was like, okay. Yeah, and the thing that I understand from that is that basically this is all related to the 5 aggregates, basically. So that's the generation of the 5 aggregates, and then you're stuck with them for as long as they last. But the thing is that in Pali, it's not, and I was just reflecting on that quite for a bit on this retreat, was that in Pali it's always panchupadanakanda, so it always has upadana in it. So it's not the 5 aggregates. It's clinging to the 5 aggregates. So that ties back to the second noble truth too. But when the clinging is gone, like I was saying again today, and that's something I really like to remind people, is that the first thing the Buddha did when he broke through to awakening was sit cross-legged in one posture without moving, enjoying the bliss of freedom. I mean... Yeah, I mean that sounds pretty good. And if you go to Bodh Gaya, like they have all these stations where, like this is where he stood still for 7 days looking at the Bodhi tree with gratitude, enjoying the bliss of freedom. And then he's actually changing 3 times. For 3 weeks, that's all he's doing. He's just like standing up, sitting down, 7 days, enjoying the bliss of freedom. I mean, come on. So at that point, it seems like there's a way to understand our experience that can be, we can be okay with it kind of thing. So I think that the 5 aggregates is not the problem, is the clinging in the 5 aggregates. So I think that's really important for us to understand. Maybe I'll touch upon that a little bit more again in the 4 resting places of awareness, the Satipatthanas. I'll explain a bit more why. And so I'll explain this in the way that it's been many years and I've tried to understand the Eightfold Path in so many ways, but I'll try to give it tonight in a way that I've understood it, and there's many ways to understand it. I'm not saying this is the only way. This teaching is just applicable in so many ways, and that's the beauty of it. It's the richness of it. And so we begin with wise understanding, and this is how this is the beginning. These are the eyes of the path, the light of the path, and the blueprint, the template that we use the whole time. That's why we start here. Then, what is wise attitude or wise intention? That is, monks, the attitude of letting go, the attitude of non-anger, and the attitude of harmlessness. And so this is at the deepest level of the mind, basically. This is what we do when we meditate. We are practicing at that level. That's the field at which we are practicing. And here you're going to start to notice, you've probably heard in Buddhism, body, speech, and mind. You've probably heard that quite a lot of times. Well, this is referring to exactly this section of the path. We have mind, speech, and body. So we're starting from the subtlest, but the most important, like the seeds, like where it all starts. Every day we recite the Dhammapada, number 1 and 2. Mind precedes all things. All are governed by the mind, created by the mind. If with a wholesome mind or unwholesome mind, a person speaks or acts, well, everything that we do comes from there. It comes from the mind. So this is the root. This is the beginning. And on retreat, this is where we spend most of our time. And here you notice that I translated nikkama as letting go, as I mentioned yesterday. Viveka, nikkama is something that I like to translate as letting go, as more applicable here and now. And this is where I use where I take the 2 wings to awakening. When I'm talking about the 2 wings to awakening, the letting go and mental uplift, this is where it is. Abhyapada is also non-anger, but this is basically any kind of wholesome states. This is where the metta is. This is where the compassion is. This is where the joy is. This is also where, the 7 factors of enlightenment are. And avihimsa sankappo, the harmlessness, the Buddha, and that's one of the things that I like to bring up over and over again. The Buddha changes things around quite often. So sometimes he uses harmlessness. Sometimes he uses delusion. Sometimes this is understood as greed, hate, and delusion. So basically, that would be non-delusion. But the thing is that we just talked about wise understanding, and that would be non-delusion, basically. So understanding things in that template. So I like to boil it down to these 2 kind of folds of mental uplift with loving kindness, compassion, and joy, and then also letting go with the relaxed step, which is really the most important thing in our practice. Okay, now moving to wise speech. And what is wise speech? That is abstaining from false speech, abstaining from spiteful speech, abstaining from unkind speech, abstaining from senseless talk. And now, we see that using the template of the Four Noble Truths, we know each of these things, the attitude at the level of intention or the level of speech. Some things cause problems, some things cause dukkha, and some things don't. And this is what we do here. And this is the wholesome bit, this is the wise choice here. But there's the unwise choice, which is the opposite. And what we do here is we use the wisdom of the Four Noble Truths to choose this. We choose the right intention and we choose the right speech. But that is a practice. That is part of the practice. And it's not separate from the meditation practice. So our behavior and our meditation is the same. It needs to be coherent. And so obviously what we think about, what churns in our mind, breaks into speech. And that's the first gate. That's the easiest. And that's the easiest gateway to come out of the mind. So that's why we have to be mindful about this one in particular. And as we protect these, and now we're getting into the territory of virtue also, of our own good behavior. As we learn to protect these, to nurture these, they will protect us in return. That is our kind of life insurance. The Buddha's Dhamma insurance. The best. And what is wise behavior? That is abstaining from mistreating living beings or killing living beings, abstaining from taking what is not given, and abstaining from sexual misconduct. And now you're starting to see this is what we repeat every morning because it does matter. It's part of the path. It's part of the stream. And as we meditate, we work on the intention, but this path of ours, this meditation of ours, doesn't just remain at the level of sitting on a cushion. So, and what is wise living? That is, monks, a follower of the awakened ones abandons unwise modes of living and shapes a life by wise modes of living. This is called wise living. Now, this is just having a profession that is that has a a base standard of virtue that is not about killing animals or beings, that is not about poison or ammunition or weapons, or like human trafficking and like all of these things. Basically, just have, the Buddha is saying, like, have an income, a way of life that is like wholesome, at least to a certain extent, because there's nothing perfectly wholesome. It's really hard to find a livelihood that is perfectly wholesome, or anybody. Like, there's always a point in their practice, in their work, where they have to make a call, they have to make a decision. As an organic market gardener, you would think that's pretty wholesome, you know. But I actually I left that job because I had to kill countless pests that we call them pests, but we call it pest management, unfortunately. But it's just killing like any kind of little bugs that come into that want to also eat your salad, because that's just going to happen when you garden. It's just a reality. So even though you want to be the most wholesome, you know, it's really hard. So of course there's ways that you can do it, and you know, prevent these things also. But you know, there's always that question of like, you know, you have like mice in your walls, or you know, you have like, what do you do when you have an infestation of this or that, these bugs? I was working at a Vipassana center for many months, and it was actually a great experience. I practiced in that tradition for quite some time, and you know, we had a ladybug like invasion. And so it's like, what do you do? It's like, we're like a Buddhist kind of, we're not harming anything, like, but there's a limit to how many thousands of ladybugs you can sweep with your broom, and like they're like in the walls. And so, you know, we try to be ingenious, but then yeah, it's really hard. And that was like a huge center, so you know, it's not easy. So even at the most virtuous places I've been and I've seen, and people I've talked to that had really virtuous professions, it's always really difficult to have it perfectly, you know. So the Buddha is just saying, like, just aim for as good as you can, and you know, that'll help your mind be calm and happy. And now we've been given the scope and the field, and so this is kind of like the field where we practice. We practice at the level of intention or attitude. We practice at the level of speech, of body, actions, and at the level of livelihood, in like getting bigger and coarser and coarser. Yet all of those matter. For one who understands the stream, for one who understands the path, all of that matters. And so there's not like a chunk of this you can say, oh no, that's actually doesn't matter. It's all together here. And so what is this wise practice? And now we're starting to dig into more like how this path works. And now we have these fields where we work in, and what's the work, what's the action, what are we doing in there? That is, monks. And now please forgive the translation, because for those who don't know, Pali syntax and English syntax are completely opposite. So in English we have subject, verb, object. In Pali it's subject, object, verb. So it always ends with the verb. And when you want to do a line by line translation, like in a Pūjā, like a chanting book, it just makes it kind of weird. So I had to adapt my translation to actually make it. I wanted the book to be more like also an aid to learn Pali. So I wanted to be the words as close as they could be to like the lines to which they refer to. And sometimes the brackets mean that maybe that part is found a little bit later in the Pali, but I just put it in the front because otherwise it doesn't make sense. So, just so you know. So as of yet, the first one, as of yet unarisen, unfavorable, unwholesome states of mind, one develops the desire, Desire? Interesting. Not to give rise to them. So for the unwholesome states that haven't come up, just to make it clear, we want to have the desire to just not give rise to them. So that's the protection aspect of the path. This is where we find the virtue. This is like the fence around our garden. This is the protection. By doing that, we're basically not going to allow a lot of unwholesome states to come into our lives. And then this is where you also find like the sense restraint, like the sangwara, basically. That is, in the suttas it would be explained like when looking at a visual object with the eye, one does not pay attention to the features and attributes of that. One kind of lets it be there, doesn't stay, doesn't cling to the characteristics of these objects. We just kind of guard the sense faculties. That's kind of what that means. And that just keeps, that patches our bucket so we can keep the water of our awareness within. And that's the first step. That's why the Buddha always starts with the virtue. He always starts with explaining sensory. I like to call it sense mastery because I feel like it's more. It just sounds better than sense restraint, which is not that appreciated in the West. And through dedicated practice, continually devoting one's mind to it, one undertakes this and makes an effort in that direction. So this is, by the way, in the four branches of right effort, of wise practice, this is where we find chanda, the word chanda. And the word chanda means desire. Wholesome desire, yeah. Interesting. It exists. Yay! Venerable Ānanda in the Sutta says it's like a Brahmin asks, you're talking about chanda and developing chanda for, the path. And it's like, does it ever end? And he's like, yeah, well, it's like using a vehicle to go from one city to another. You jump in the vehicle, you use it, you go to the city, you drop it. Then you're done. That's the purpose. So more and more we're developing the path. The path is our vehicle, and then at the end we even let go of the path, like the Buddha said. We don't need the raft anymore. We don't need to haul it onto our heads. We're on the other side. We can just leave it. As for number 2, as for already arisen, unfavorable, unwholesome states of mind, one develops the desire to let them go. And so through the dedicated practice, continually devoting one's mind to it, one understands this and makes an effort in that direction. And so here we have obviously the letting go part of the path. First is to protect. So if we divide the wise practice into 2 parts, there's one part that deals with unwholesome states and the other part that deals with wholesome states. So to keep it simple. And the first one is to protect ourselves from unwholesome states. Then it's to actually abandon those that might have been already there. And then now we're keeping on going to the other side of the coin here, to the wholesome states. As for unarisen states that haven't come up yet, wholesome states of mind, one develops the desire to give rise to them. So this is where we have the metta, the spiritual friend, the compassion, the meditation practice. Like continuously, because what the mind thinks and reflects upon over and over again, it becomes the inclination of the mind. So we're just reconditioning our mind, but in a wholesome way. Whether we like it or not, we're always conditioning our minds. So our minds are like they're spongy, yeah. It absorbs what it's around with and what it practices. And if we practice, harsh speech, well, then that's what it's going to be. If we practice the path, then loving kindness, then it's going to arise more and more, just as a second nature. Through dedicated practice, continually devoting one's mind to it. As for already present, wholesome states, one develops the desire to sustain them for their increase, growth, maturation, development. Through dedicated practice, continually devoting one's mind to it, one undertakes this and makes an effort in that direction. And so here, there is that aspect of developing these qualities in the first place, but there's also that aspect of cultivating them and really developing in the long term and continually these wholesome states. Like we would grow a garden, we first take out the weeds, and then we fence around, then we take out the weeds, then we plant the food crops, and then we cultivate it, we nurture it, and we let it grow. And wise practice, right effort, has two kind of, for each of them, there's allusion to the either unwholesome states or wholesome states that need to be abandoned or cultivated. But also, it doesn't just say like abandon unwholesome states. It says each of them develop the desire for that, continually doing this and being fully devoted. And so we don't just have this element of just saying about wholesome states and unwholesome state. He says every time Chandang janati vayamati viriyang arabati chittang paganhati padahati, through dedicated practice, continually devoting one's mind to it. And so that's whenever the Buddha talks about effort or viriya in the suttas, he's actually referring to right effort most of the time. And right effort is basically about devotion, being devoted to that, not like, trying to like really meditate hard on like, I'm just going to be really loving. Well, that's great, but but it's more like a continual thing, and that's just not sustainable. So we're trying to go the long run. We're in it for the long run. So,
Bhante, can I ask a question?
Please.
So this came up in the interviews today about essentially recognizing earlier, before the mind enters an unwholesome state. So the first of the right efforts there, protecting, and you called it sense mastery. So how do you understand that in terms of how a meditator would practice in their daily life? And for a little context, I guess for everyone also, if you go into a traditional monastic community in Asia, or at least in my experience, this was a pretty common topic or kind of thing that the monks were concerned about, especially going for alms round. This idea of really protecting the senses by having the eyes downcast when you go to the village, and it takes on kind of this just in a few conversations I had with other monks, it was really this thing that they wanted to guard, and almost not just very carefully not want to look at something that might catch their eye and spark an unwholesome state. So I'm curious, in this practice, I think we see it a little differently. And how would you describe cultivating this and really catching it quicker this before it becomes like a full thought story in the mind.
Yeah. Well, I really get that feeling of like knowing exactly what the Buddha meant when I go for a walk in Kalimpong downtown. It's like like it's a mountain station in the foothills in the Himalayas. So it's kind of a bit like Nepal, and it's got like these really narrow roads with like congested traffic and lots of honking and like spider webs of electric wires and like all kinds of signs. And I love it there, by the way. I'm not saying like I just, that's where I actually spend most of my time. It's kind of where I live now, but I do feel like it's really heavy on the mind to kind of always look into these things, and depending on how we practice. So basically some meditation practices, from what I've experienced, are really kind of narrowing down attention and kind of tend to shut out experiences. And for me, I've practiced methods like that in the past, and I know how my mental state was at that point, where I really wanted to like shut distractions outside of my experience. Basically, I was really kind of owning in on one specific thing, or whether it was bodily sensations or whether it was like a one-pointed object. Where I practiced with a few, so it's not just one. And I noticed my mind getting very, very tight and very rigid through that. The mental control and clarity that I gained from my really scattered mind before that was amazing. I mean, just getting to that level of having some kind of level of mental control was good. But but then there came a point where I wanted to practice more, and like 5 hours a day, for example. And then it started getting really kind of problematic, because it was a lot about shutting out experiences. And every time something would hit, it would hit really hard, because the mind, when it's really narrowed down to that level, any kind of outside distraction will really kind of knock the awareness out. And so I know what you're talking about, I know what you're referring to, and in one way it's true that we kind of want to guard these things, like lowering your eyes, and you might be looking at like, those look like really good donuts or whatever. I don't know. Or whatever it is, It's like there's a lot of these things out there. I feel like there's a skillful way of doing that, and then there's a non-skillful way, or less skillful way. When there's a lot of tension, and when it actually generates tension, for me, that's kind of where there's not enough wisdom in the practice. That's where I find is, because when I was practicing these, I actually became very critical of myself, of others also, because what I did was to really point down onto really specific objects, and that's what the mind does all the time. So whatever you do with your mind, that's what it's going to do after too. So I would say to my parents, like, well, you don't know what you're talking about, like, like you're not meditating, and so, well, maybe not like that, but I was a bit more respectful, but in my mind, that's what was going on, kind of thing. And that's not a nice place to be in your mind. It's not coming from a loving, wholesome mind. And when I started to dive deeper into these practices, and Bhante also talks about that with his previous practices, which he did for like more than 20 years and really extensive retreats, he was also noticing that his mind was very cold and rigid, and his interactions with people were not that kind, actually. And you have that in some circles, in some communities where these practices are really deep. For example, interactions become very harsh. It's not like disrespectful, but really not pleasant. It's like iron knocking on iron kind of thing. It's just, and it's always looking at minute, very specific minute detail that like are really bothersome to them or whatever it is. And I mean, I've had people come to me, like practicing some kind of some types of meditations that were actually not developing letting go, but actually clinging. So we really have to be careful what we're doing with our minds. It's a very powerful thing. And so that's why I, like personally on retreats, I really make an emphasis on, taking your time, be that natural for yourself, like wherever you are. You should never like force anything. It always should come for you from the right place, from your heart, and it feels good to do it. And if it doesn't, like don't even go there. Like, yes.
I've practiced in something very similar.
Mm-hmm.
What can happen is, speaking of right effort,
Mm-hmm.
is the effort becomes one where it's very hard.
Yes.
Like mind crush.
Yes.
Hard. And then the mind then, because of that, like what you were saying, it becomes really hardened, and that kind of effort is, well, I wouldn't say that would be right effort, but there is a real push towards people to push themselves, push through it, push through the defilement,
Yes.
and beat the mind down kind of thing.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and at some point there can be breakup points where the mind will just crack, and it will the mind will crush, and no, relax. That's just don't go there. And the reason why I encountered this practice was I was extremely struggling with my own practice, and I was hitting a wall, and I didn't know. Like you said, it's like I could crush mind with mind, and I could crush my experience. I could be equanimous, sit for like 3 hours in like pure pain, like pure pain, like all of it, from beginning to end. And it became like I felt like my whole being became completely dry. And I was just like I know it's like a forbidden word in Buddhism, but like soulless kind of thing, like I didn't have any kind of being in there, it was just like I was just dry. And I could see that how the Buddha's line of reasoning when he did all of these austere practices, where he realized of all these austerities, anybody that's done any kind of austerities in the past, this is the limit. Like he was gonna die. Like his body was dying. Like he would try to stand up and pee, and he would just like slap his legs because they were asleep, and his hair would fall off, and he would just like fall on his face, and like not even being able to pee, and he wasn't eating, and he was like, if somebody's done this, like this is as far as it goes, and then it's death, but I'm not awakened. Like I don't feel like that. And personally, I had the same kind of understanding at that point where, I could sit through all that pain, and because that's another view in this spiritual world is that, and that was really part of a lot in the Jain tradition, because they had these tapas, they had these austere practices. And the goal behind that is that you had to purify your karma through these penances. And so the more pain you would endure, the more it would purify your karma. And that also has crept back into Buddhism, into certain traditions. Not a full-fledged way, but just because we've lost a lot of the time. I feel like it's rare to find places where right effort is really well understood, and how the mind becomes collected through what we're reading every morning. I haven't found many, if any, that really make that their meditation. It's and a lot of the time you'll be told to kind of sit and remain equanimous with whatever sensation you're experiencing, whether it's pleasant, whether it's unpleasant. But the thing is that at that point, there's no real mental development. Of course, I've gained some things from that. It wasn't completely useless, but the main thing that I got out of it is that it's not leading to the same thing that we're talking here. So we become very aware. That's what I was realizing, is I became really aware of the first and the second Noble Truths. You just become very, very, very aware of it. But that's it. There's no going over the bump kind of thing. It's like, but what's next, Buddha? And so this is kind of where that ends.
So then, was that why the middle path is so important to understanding when awake or tired?
Yes,
and that
yes.
connection between the two?
Yeah, and that's another point where what is the Eightfold Path? Well, it is that middle way. So, and what's the middle way? It's not extreme asceticism and penances, but it's not also like pure indulgence in the sense faculties for happiness. Basically, that's what he discovered. There's a lot of things to say about that, but anyways, sometimes people say like, "Oh yeah, I'm just like gonna buy a car, and like I'm hesitating between a Jaguar and like a BMW. I'll go for a Volvo or something. That's gonna be the middle way." It's like, nah, that's not what the Buddha had in mind. I'm sorry. That's cute, but so when we're talking about the middle way, we're talking about, the Buddha first left his kingly life of indulgence in the sense pleasures, and because he saw the four messengers, he saw the person that was sick, the old person, and the dead person, and the ascetic, and that's what made him go forth, and then through that journey, he started doing penances and thinking that was like evil, like the senses are evil, and everything is like, you don't want to be touching that at all, which was the predominant kind of Jain practice at that time, moving away from that and penances. And as he did that to the extreme, more extreme, then he realized the other end, which was, okay, that's not either the path, it's actually doesn't lead to awakening. And so he started eating a little bit. Then the Jain ascetics left him, and then with like very little food, but enough because what we're practicing is hard to feel when you're like almost dying. It's just not gonna work. You need to be in an okay shape. And that's why we have the reflection on the four requisites as monks and nuns, and as monastics, is that we use food to how much we need, but it's not, it's not for beautifying the body. It's not for a life of, sensory indulgence. It's just for maintaining comfort in the body so we can practice. And so we develop that understanding, and the medicines are the same, the robes are the same. It's just to cover the body. It's just to kind of keep us okay, good for practice. Have the bare minimum: food, shelter, clothing, medicine, and then from that, not going beyond that, taking what we need for practice, and then that's it. So that's the middle way. And then the Eightfold Path arises out of that.
Sorry, Bhante, if I could just quickly come back to my question.
I knew this was coming.
Overemphasized how others are doing it, and I just wanted to come back to how you would recommend someone to catch the distraction earlier.
Yes.
Because this came up in the interviews, and I think it could probably help everyone a little bit, because we know that once a thought becomes like full blown, it's much harder to 6R it, and this would be more like the second two right efforts. But how would you understand protecting it from even getting to that point?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think one of the best places to see that in the suttas is all the distractions, Sabbasava Sutta, number 2 in the middle length discourses. And the Buddha says, not when seeing. So I think the 6 R's in general are just really good, because, we talk about the 6 R's. These principles can be explained in different ways. Don't think that this is the only way, but it's just easier to teach and to practice. It's like, it's a mnemonic device. It's easy to remember, and it's just like, here we go. It's simple. But if you do that while you're walking in town, for example, well, for me, that's kind of what I'm doing. Is like I'm looking for, like, for example, where I'm going, because I need to look where I'm going, because otherwise I get hit by a car or something. It's Kalimpong, and then just knowing that wherever you're gonna put your attention, that's gonna kind of start leaking, or it's gonna so just being aware of that. And there's a way in which you can actually remain into this presence and not kind of leak into the outside world. There's different levels to it, but the Buddha is also saying, don't jump in front, don't go near a wild horse, don't go near a wild elephant, don't go, don't walk into a cesspool, he's saying, it's like, don't stand in the middle of the road, it's not gonna be good for your mindfulness, you're just gonna it's not, there's things to avoid, there's things that help us protect our mindfulness. And I think it's not about trying to catch something before, but it's just remaining, resting, and this is the next step. That's why I call it the resting places of awareness, because when you rest there, that's where the attention is. And every time you will see or do or something, that your awareness will flow out to that. But if you keep releasing and relaxing and coming back, so it's, sometimes the thing is, if we put emphasis on trying to catch something earlier, then it might just unbalance the practice. Someone might try to do something, like control their experience, instead of just allowing the hindrance to come up. Because however long it's going to be there, that's just the reality of it. It's like, we're not trying to make it quicker or go faster. If we try to do that, you're going to see tension right away coming. You're trying to control your experience. You're not trying to let go. So it's the same thing with trying to catch something earlier.
Right. Yeah, interesting. There's one sutta I can think of in the Samyutta Nikaya, I think like Book of 35s, where Buddha gives this analogy of the senses as being like these 6 wild animals that are all running in different directions. And it's almost like, the eyes are wanting your attention to go to what it's looking at, and the ears are wanting your attention to go there. And then he talks about putting a post and tying them to it. And it's, however, I'm curious how you translate this, but it's like kaya gasati, like mindfulness of the body, but is it kind of the 4 foundations, would you say, essentially?
Yeah, kaya gata sati is like the awareness of the body, awareness gone to the body, which is kind of reining in kind of the senses. I just feel like we have to be careful about these analogies because there's a way in which they can be interpreted in a controlling way, which is not our practice. Our practice is about letting go and wisdom. And so that's our main objective. And if we try to control our experience, that means we don't understand what's going on. So when a distraction arises or a hindrance or, attention is pulled out, we've just basically forgotten that, we need to actually let that go. And so, of course, there's grosser levels to it. You just don't want to expose yourself to things that'll be a real big challenge for you. But when the Buddha says that, I feel like he might be saying that to certain kinds of people that maybe that need just a little bit of, being checked in kind of thing. But because we say some things to some people because they need to hear it, but the thing is, it's not always a general instruction for everybody. Right. So I think we need to be careful about that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's a big cultural gap too sometimes.
Yeah.
I feel.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you.
Yeah, great.
Long tangent. I apologize.
That's okay. Okay, just checking myself here. Oh, wow. Okay, so let's just move on. Actually, this is a little bit on the same topic. So we're going into wise awareness. What is this wise awareness or wise presence of mind? I actually like presence of mind more. That is, one meditates, resting one's awareness on the body, knowing it as only body, intent, fully conscious and present, letting go of the tensions and distractions, resting one's awareness on sensations, knowing them as only sensations, intent, fully conscious and present, letting go of tensions and distractions, resting one's awareness on mind, knowing it as only mind, intent, fully conscious and present, letting go of tensions and distractions. Resting one's awareness on mental states or Dhamma, knowing them as only mental states, intent, fully conscious and present, letting go of tensions and distractions. I like to translate it like this because it's very applicable to our experience. Abhijja can mean kind of like clinging or holding on, but it also has that kind of notion of tension in it. So, and domanassa is like the opposite of somanassa. So, like having uplifted mind or having a distracted mind or a heavier mind, basically. What happens here is that once we develop wholesome states, awareness becomes clearer. And this is the analogy of the sand dunes and the desert that I gave yesterday. Like the body and sensations is like the grain of sands and the dunes. And it's very clear and pristine. And mind and Dhamma, mental states, or that can be interpreted as like Dhamma principles, are like the clouds and the sky and the clouds passing by. And more we start to just see these things just as they are, with really clear awareness. Not as me, not as a self, because the states we're developing, like love, compassion, joy, altruistic joy, letting go, we're all attenuating the notion of the self slowly. And when we don't take things personal, when we don't identify with the storylines in our minds, we just know it's mental contact. There's a thought arising, there's an attachment to it. Doesn't matter the story, doesn't matter what event it is, the imagery, the vocabulary, the script of the mind that it comes up with. He just release, relax. It's all the same. Just a thought that came from mental contact, that maybe came from a sensory input. And that was it. And we don't need to take it personal. We don't need to make a big deal out of it. And that is extremely freeing, just right there. And this is, I like to call it the resting places of awareness, because this is where the mind will be resting more and more. And see, so that this upatana or patana is like that idea of foundation, but what's a house resting on? It's resting on the foundation, basically. So it's that idea of that solid ground, that island that is there. And we just, as it becomes clearer and clearer, the mind just like rests upon these things, and it's not agitated. Dependent origination, cleaned up of craving, is the 4 foundations of mindfulness. So dependent origination that we talked about last night, without tanha, upadana, bhava, jati, dukkha, without all this, what we're left with is the 4 foundations of mindfulness. So that is body, rupa, salayatana, the 6 senses. Vedana is in there. Vedana is not personal, it's just happening. This sensations that you're experiencing right now, they're there. That's it. You're not making them up. Then you have chitta, which is nama, vinyana. And you have, Dhamma is basically the Dhamma principles in this whole thing. So to see dependent origination just as it is. To see the 6 senses as it is. To see, because if you read the Satipatthana Sutta, for example, and I'm just like really making it short here, he's talking about what is Dhamma as Dhamma, like Dhamma principles. Basically seeing the 7 factors of enlightenment just as they are. It's not personal. It's like, it's chemistry. It's mathematic. It's that simple. It's you let go of the hindrances, there's relief. It's not personal. From that relief, if you keep going, there's going to be joy. There's going to be piti. It's just the way the mind works, because it's just relieving not to have these hindrances. That's it. From that joy, there is that calm, because the joy cleans the mind. It clears the mind, it makes it calm down. It's easy to let go when you're happy. It's easy, it's just no problem. It's all good. And after you're calmed down, the mind is happy, collected, it becomes unified. It's just the way the mind works. It's not like a personal thing, like I'm not different than anybody in here. Like it's not There's nothing special about it. So the 7 factors of awakening is the factors of awakening. When I do this, this happens. That's it. And then to know the 6 senses as the 6 senses, basically that's also kind of dependent origination. There's an object, there's a sense, there's a contact, there's a consciousness that arises from it, there's a sensation, an experience, then there's an opinion, a judgment, a concept. But at that point, it's knowing, understanding that for what it is, not buying into it. If we're this far out, thinking about in our storyline about whatever arose, or we're this far, it doesn't matter. It's the same process. So we just 6R, let go, no problem. It's going to get shorter and shorter. But we're not there to judge that. Like another one of the Satipatthanas, in the mind, he says to know a collected mind as a collected mind, a distracted mind as a distracted mind, a scattered mind as a scattered mind. So we're not making a big deal out of it. It's just the way it is. We know the way to a collected mind. Might take a few days, might take a few hours. But the way is the way, that's it. So Dhamma as Dhamma is just knowing these principles. And it's got nothing personal about it. Everybody's kind of the same on that level. So here we are. And so these are the 4 things that the mind will start to rest upon more and more. And you can have the Brahma Viharas while practicing the Satipatthanas. These are not cut clean, boxed out, things that don't happen, don't touch, don't ever, meet each other. They're actually mutually beneficial and they encourage each other. They're like an ecosystem. So it's all together. And what is wise meditation, or what is wise collectedness? Disengaging oneself from the senses, letting go of unwholesome mental states, assisted by thinking and imagination. With the joy and happiness born of letting go, one understands and abides the first level of meditation. As thinking and imagining calms down, with inner tranquilization, one's mind becoming unified, without thinking and imagination. With the joy and happiness born of mental collectedness, one understands and dwells in the second level of meditation. And here is the third level, is where we find that viraga word that I was talking about yesterday, pitiyacha viraga. And this is actually just means calm down, to tone down. As excited joy or stronger joy calms down and one dwells in steady awareness, present, fully comprehending, still experiencing ease within one's body, a state which the awakened ones describe as steady presence of mind. This is a pleasant abiding. See, more and more at the beginning we have a lot of joy and it's like, way, yay, it's great, it's amazing. But a lot of people now are starting to understand that actually the joy calming down and giving way to an even clearer and stiller, more still mental awareness or mental steadiness is actually even better. But to try to go there, like, okay, I'm just going to be still. It's not the same thing. We're not talking about the same thing. We need to follow that process. This is like a process, a recipe. You can't, conjure a further state and try to make it happen. It's like it has to happen somewhat in this way. It can be fast, but it cannot be jumped over. So, unattached to pleasant sensations, unsteered by unpleasant ones. As mental excitement and heaviness settle, one's mind is balanced, purified by unmoving presence. One understands and abides in the fourth level of meditation. And so these are roughly this kind of like the stages of what's the mind going to do when we practice right effort. It's natural awareness, clarity is going to come, and we're going to see things. We're not going to buy into the storylines. We're not going to have so many concepts, opinion, judgments, and like investments in all of the things in our experience. We're just going to be resting in, like, body is there. Sensations arising, passing away. The mind is the way that it is. It's either clear, it's either scattered. But if we were to like judge it, it would actually add upon it. So why even bother? Why even doing it? And so, for example, slowly we're going to see that things don't trigger us that much anymore. And that's one place where you want to be looking at your own progress, for example. Not like a certificate or anything. But for example, like there's a little tiny leak in the shower in the cabin, and it's like constantly dropping. And it could be really annoying, but it's not. And why? Because I don't buy into it. It doesn't matter, it's like, it's there, so what? Like, I've tried tightening it up a little bit more and it doesn't work. And actually, it's like, it doesn't matter that much. And more and more, the mind will start to really have this stillness that is more present all the time, and not attaching labels on things. Of course, like if there's like an elephant walking in your room, that's another story. But these little things that used to bug you, because I know that would have bugged me when I was practicing, a certain other kind of meditation, for example, and a little sound would be like, what is this? Somebody disturbed my meditation. Like they're gonna have so much demerit. It's like, I'm so important. Like my meditation is so important. And anyways, so and noticing these things where these sounds or these ways of people maybe interacting with us, or the ways of things, and there's just gonna be enough space and mental clarity to not actually be disturbed, and be like just like water purling on the dock, basically on the dock's back. We're not actually holding on to it. We just know it's actually just going to heavy us down if we hold it. It's just better if we just let it go. And that's about it. So we have wise understanding, the blueprint, how we see. This is the way that we're going to see things, and especially mental states, and especially regarding basically letting go of that tension that is in the distractions, and that is tanha, and that little magnetic pole. Sometimes, depending. And as we start to understand reality like this, then we have mind, speech, body, livelihood, which we apply that template to in each of them with right effort. Right effort is what we do in each of these levels of the mind, the speech, and the body, and livelihood. We choose what is wholesome, we let go what is unwholesome. And that is the meditation. In the Mahācattārisaka Sutta 119, I think, the Great 40, the Buddha says, I will teach you what is this noble Samādhi, this noble meditation or mental collectedness. He says, it is just this wise understanding, wise intention, wise speech, wise action, wise living, livelihood, wise effort, wise practice, and wise presence of mind. That is wise collectedness of the Aryas. The wise Samādhi is the Eightfold path, and I'm not making that up. So the Buddha is saying that's what we do, that's what we practice, from the virtues to our behavior, to our livelihood, and to our mental states in meditation. And that is the Eightfold Path. And I will end this long talk. I'm sorry. With a sutta that I really love. It's just a beautiful analogy of what the path could be like if we imagine it to be like a chariot. At that time, the Venerable Ānanda, having dressed up in the morning, took his bowl and robe and went for alms in Savatthi. There he saw the Brahman Janusoni in an all-white chariot harnessed to white mares, leaving Savatthi. Even its yokes and decorations were white. A white carriage with white accessories, white reins, white driver's stick, white canopies, and he was wearing himself a white turban, white clothes, white sandals, while being fanned by white feathered fans. Having seen this, he said, "This carriage of yours is divine indeed, good sir, a heavenly sight, a heavenly vehicle." Then the Venerable Ānanda in the afternoon went back to the Buddha, and he said, "Bhante, would there be a way to compare this Dhamma practice to a divine vehicle?" The Buddha said, it is possible, Ānanda. That is an expression for this eight-spoked path of the awakened ones, Ānanda. That is the divine vehicle. The vehicle of Dhamma, the unsurpassed victory in battle. Wise understanding, Ānanda, when developed and practiced continually, has the elimination of discontent, the elimination of anger, the elimination of delusion as its final destination. Wise intention, wise speech, wise behavior, wise living, wise practice, wise presence of mind, wise meditation, Ānanda. When developed and practiced continually, they all have the elimination of discontent, the elimination of anger, and the elimination of delusion as their final destination. In this way, it should be known that this is an expression for the eight-spoked path of the awakened ones. That is the divine vehicle, the vehicle of Dhamma, the unsurpassed victory in battle. Having said this, he spoke further. Both qualities of faith and discernment always yoked together evenly, with conscientiousness as the pole, mind as the rope, awareness as its careful driver. The complete body of virtue is the carriage, meditation its axle, inspiration the wheels, steadiness of mind is the even alignment. The whole is covered and draped in contentment. Goodwill and harmlessness, letting go as a third, are its weaponry. Forgiveness is the armor and protection, headed to freedom from slavery. The divine vehicle, unsurpassed, arises from within oneself. With it, the wise leave behind this world, assured of the highest victory.
Have difficulty difficulty with giving up the self/consciousness. Get the title we have left?
Yeah. Well, this is kind of what awakening means. Giving up in the end is understanding that there's no real substance to a self in our experience. It's just basically all conditioned, and it is held together by clinging. And consciousness is the last gate. Like I've explained in the talk on the meditation stages, and then the talk yesterday on dependent origination. The last bastion of this sense of I is when we only are working at the level of consciousness, when the body has been let go of, the mind is extremely clear and still, and one is able to that's where the clearest kind of consciousness is, and the meditator will slowly get familiar with that space of clear stillness and spend a lot of time there and see how that consciousness actually in the end is still fabricated, because how I've explained it yesterday with the starlings, the murmuration, the cloud, and at this point we've taken out all of the little birds of activities one by one, and it takes a long time. There's a lot of them, and it's not something we can rush. And at some point, it's like the cloud of consciousness is. It's like we can't really tell if it's there or not. It's like there's not enough little birds anymore to say that there's a cloud. So it's just really hard to tell. Is there still consciousness? And then someone can go through phases where it seems like actually there's no more awareness itself. But it feels even better in a sense, because it's like all these little activities, they're kind of a little bit troublesome. And I forgot to say yesterday, but one of the deepest insight at that level, which answers that question, is that actually at this point a meditator can see tension in awareness itself. And it's very subtle, very minute, but it's there. And to release it feels even better. And when there is the breaking apart of the sankharas that constitute consciousness, then there is no more aggregates to associate with. There's the mind, there's not even consciousness of this anymore, because what's aware when there's no more awareness? Then nothing. We get that question a lot, actually. Well, not a lot, but sometimes people will ask, but what's aware of awareness? That's just like the question is not properly formulated. It's actually like awareness is the thing that's aware. There's nothing aware of consciousness. Consciousness is the thing that's aware. When there's no more consciousness, there's nothing that's aware. It's gone. So because there's such an attachment to like that sense of self, that sense of identity, that there's a everlasting kind of soul behind everything, and there is and the Buddha is clearly teaching that there is the breaking up of all conditions, of all sankharas, and with that, consciousness loses its support, it loses its place, and what is aware is consciousness. So once that's gone, then it's gone. It's actually, that's why he came up with the word nibbana, because it's the blowing out of even that consciousness. It's the blowing out of the fire of greed, hate, and delusion, yes, and it's also interpreted in the sequence we read every morning as the blowing out of every residual conditionings, the sankharas in the mind. So, and to attain that doesn't mean that a person becomes an arahant or any stages of awakening, or it's a very profound experience, and depending on what happens afterwards, depending on the person, somebody can lose that. It doesn't mean that it's just an experience, If there's no wisdom around it, if somebody just like relax and gets there, and then their mind stops, I don't know, but but I don't know how that would be kind of. But we do have quite a few instances actually that we've noticed that people seem to have that experience, that very profound experience of what is called cessation or nirodha samapatti. But there's no wisdom arising out of it. So that doesn't mean that because one is there that there's necessarily wisdom. So it's, mark my words, it's probably very likely that there will be. But we've had many instances that actually contradicted that, so it shook the theory. So, well, people seemingly attaining these states, the very, very, very profound state of like mental, like cessation of perception and experience. But the behavior, for example, doesn't change, or it doesn't, there's no real deepening of experience. So either are they really attaining that properly, or what's going on? It's not sure. A lot of meditators. So that's why it's a very personal thing. You need to stay on the right side of perplexity, or like have a little bit of healthy doubt. Yes, always keep that, and that's why we keep it to ourselves, because we're not always sure. And to bring that forward would be probably a little bit boastful. Maybe taking a step ahead of a step ahead. And so, always questioning. Personally, that's what I do. Whatever my experience is, I always question it. Not like I make it a huge deal in my mind, and that's not what I mean. But I always keep a healthy dose of doubt, and always remember, like the Buddha called it paccavekkhana, like reflect back on your experience and think, okay, what was that? What happened? And if a person understands dependent origination, can describe the process very well, doubt is gone. They're like very certain about the path. They know the Eightfold Path is like, okay, I understand it for sure. This is how it works. Then it's more credible. Then it's more like, okay, then you're on a good track. Keep going. But then again, it's, these are personal things, and to let go of the self and consciousness, well, that's what happens. So there is the Buddha called the jhanas all the way to cessation. He called them the temporary liberations, and the stages of awakening, the Arya Puggalas, stream entry, once returner, non-returner, and full awakening arahant. He said that these, which are related to fetters and actually understandings, like levels of actual understandings and behavior, these are the unshakable liberations. So we have the temporary, which are good. We're developing this, but in the end, what matters is the actual fetters. So in the end, what you want to be looking at is, well, when you go back to your family, do you get angry? Do you get stressed out? Do you like retaliate? Or like, are you able to be that, you're actually not fazed by things, and you're actually able to take it in and respond with love and respond with compassion? Because you see, more and more what's going to happen is that the more we practice this path, the more we taste the bliss of freedom within ourselves, we understand how others are creating themselves so many problems in their minds. And when we will come upon that, that is why wisdom and compassion come together so much. Is because when the deeper the wisdom is of understanding how people and ourselves create our own problems, we're able to see that in others, and it's like instantly we feel compassion, because we see that, well, it's just because they're not understanding the way the mind works, basically, that they're doing that to themselves, that they would be like impatient or mean to somebody, to you, to other people. And so these two come together, and yeah, that's how you can tell if you're actually making progress. So not by any kind of temporary anything. So, yay! We're finished the questions. Okay, let's share our merits. Page 213. And by the way, everybody is doing really good, and it's making me happy to see you happy, and it's really beautiful to see. So well done. Keep going. Okay. May suffering ones be suffering free, and the fear-struck fearless be. May the grieving shed all grief, and may all beings find relief. May all beings share these merits that we have thus acquired for the acquisition of all kinds of happiness. May beings inhabiting space and earth, devas and nagas of mighty powers, share these merits of ours. May they long protect the Buddha's dispensation. Sadhu.